Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Doctor Who, as well as the latest episode of Orphan Black. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Doctor Who, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Orphan Black. But the first thing we're going to talk about is this week's episode of Doctor Who, a very, very good episode where I thought it was kind of interesting. I figured it had to play a part into it, but at the very beginning, it's like, oh, we're in present day Scotland, and then it's like, oh, okay, obviously we're in the past, like for the rest of the episode. But basically, the episode deals with these things known as the Eaters of Light, which is basically these almost like dragon-looking things that basically devour light, and they actually suck it out of a person, making it seem like that person hasn't been exposed. The way the doctor puts it, it's like, yeah, like it's almost like you haven't been exposed to the sun for decades in moments because it literally sucks the light out of you and feeds on you. It's kind of interesting that the whole episode started, well, I mean, obviously this was already going on, but the reason why they got mixed up in all of this is because the doctor and Bill got into a like competition of like, oh, who knows more about the Romans? Oh, I know more about the Romans. No, I know more about the Romans. I know more about the Romans. You know, the doctor saying like, I've spent time with them. I knew them. He was like, oh, I was like the second something. And even Nardo was like, whoa, second? He's like, yeah, long story. I guess whatever he was really saying was basic. I guess assume like a very high position or whatever. I mean, Doctor's been around for a long time, so it doesn't surprise me. He's, you know, I mean, the fact of the matter is he's in good graces with presidents, queens, and such. So it's like he's got a lot underneath his resume. Is all I can say. And, but basically, I mean, it's actually kind of sad, like the circumstance of the reason why this whole debacle happened. Because basically you have the Roman soldiers in this episode as well as the quote-unquote barbarians. That's what the Romans call them. Well, I guess I'll refer to them as the barbarians. I mean, I guess you could also describe them as a tribe or whatever. The villagers, I guess, would be a more accurate statement in that particular case. But nevertheless, that basically this happened because of Romans, you know, coming to conquer and everything, which even like the villagers like, yeah, the fact of the matter is it's not even like you're monsters. You came here, you slaughtered people. You call it like an empire, but all it is, you raining destruction upon someone else. You came to take what someone else has. If someone's rich, you take what they have. If they're poor, you make them slaves. It's like, you know, trying to put like a more positive spin on like, oh, we're expanding the empire. It's like, no, you burn and destroy and pillage everything that's in your way is kind of the mentality behind it. And basically the main person that was leading the village now is this girl, Car. Basically, she's like super young herself, but it's like she has no choice because all of the probably like because the only people that are really left are like the younger, it's like the kids and stuff, mainly because like the adults and stuff went off to fight and everything and were wiped out by the Romans. She is known as the gatekeepers because basically there's the whole like, you know, world of like this interdimensional rift. I guess it's almost similar to the whole situation in Class, you know, like that tear. It's kind of similar to that, but it basically leads to this dimension where all those things exist, which is also kind of interesting that time works differently there because it's like the doctor's like, yeah, I was in there for a couple of seconds, and Nardo was like, nah, you were in there for like 2 days. Immediately my mind goes like, because the closest comparison I can think of like that is the hyperbolic time chamber from Dragon Ball Z. That's immediately where my brain goes. Like, if, you know, putting it in a different comparison with someone, like, oh yeah, you know, it makes sense to me too in a similar sense. But nevertheless, the fact of the matter is, Carr let this thing out because it's like, I need to stop like these people from hurt. Like, I want revenge for these people who've killed the people that I love and care about. Now I'm like alone and everything. So it's like, nah, they're not getting away with this. So she knows it's a very dangerous thing because her people have spent years fighting this thing back and everything. But she let it out because like in her mind, it's like, okay, even if it doesn't wipe out all of the Romans, at the very least, it'll weaken them enough so that, you know, maybe they're strong enough to wipe it out or at least weaken it. So either way, you know, it's a situation of like come in, sweep in and kill whatever is weakened, whether it's the Eater of Light or whether it's the Romans. But sadly, it turns out the thing was stronger and it ended up wiping out the entire army. I think it ended up saying like it ended up killing it was like an army of thousands wiped out in like an hour or so. Just showing you how powerful this thing is. I mean, because they never actually outright kill the thing this episode. I don't think there's no way to actually kill it. I guess if it's in a weakened enough state, you could kill it, but it's just a situation of like the whole circumstance is like, hey, get it back to its world. It's kind of interesting also how the episode was divided because obviously you have Bill spending time with the Romans and obviously the doctor with the barbarians. And I love that whole conversation with Nardal being like, oh, I love what you done with the place. It's like, oh, do you want some popcorn? And the doctor's like, what the hell are you doing? He's like, well, I'm just trying to, you're trying to like, be hospitable, and I guess in a sense. And the doctor's like, stop, that's annoying. He's like, it's annoying. It's charm. And the doctor's like, I don't like charm. And Nardal's like, well, yeah, we know that. But then also how they got out because he just threw the popcorn in the fire, and it's like, yeah, so I know you're scared and everything, but could you just use it as an opportunity to let me and Nardal run away? The popcorn starts going off, and they run. So, but I mean, obviously, it's a thing that pops up in the episode of like, because immediately Bill's like, well, what's going on here? Well, you're speaking Latin, but I can understand you and everything. And then she starts breaking it down. She's like, all right, like it must be something with the doctor or the TARDIS. There's this whole like translation thing. It's like. So she's like, she's like, I've been wondering why all the aliens have been speaking in English. It's like, I guess in her mind, she's like, oh, I guess I've just assumed every alien knows English. It's like, this makes more sense now. Which I vaguely feel like that's come up before. Like that possibly can't come up a lot. I feel like that was like some early season stuff, maybe. I vaguely feel like that might have come up. I think it's just one of those situations of like, oh, you just don't think about it. But it's like, I don't know. I feel like that was vaguely a thing, but maybe that's not the case at all. Maybe that never popped up before now, because there's a lot of things that Bill kind of brings up in conversation that I don't know about. Don't remember like some stuff. I feel like I remember her bringing up in the not her, other people who've been with the doctor and everything like that. Like they've brought those situations up before, those questions and stuff before, but it's like a lot of it's kind of renewed because it's like, once again, I haven't seen the earlier seasons in a long while. So it's like interesting for her to bring up questions because I'm like, oh, because I get this feeling like a lot of those questions have already been asked before, but they're not always asked repeatedly, I feel like. So also, like, I kind of got an answer to a question I was also curious about in the past episode. I was like, oh yeah, like the doctor had put on that, like when he was like dealing with the monks and everything, how he set up the whole situation of faking his regeneration and everything. I was like, does Bill even know about regeneration and stuff? But he brings it up in conversation in this episode, which I'll kind of get to in a second. So it's like, the fact of the matter is he brought it up in conversation means he's had that conversation with her. So it's like, why did you avoid it so much in the beginning? Because anytime the subject came up, he's like, oh yeah, never mind. I mean, it makes you wonder, did he ever really go too deeply into detail about it? Maybe he kind of kept it pretty vague like he has about other stuff, but I don't know. But nevertheless, because obviously when it was all said and done, like the doctor wanted to handle this situation himself, because he's like, out of anyone, I can handle this situation because I lived for such a long time, plus I regenerate too. I'm the only one that can really do this, like, because it's like, hey, like time moves faster, time would move differently in that world. So it's like he could be there for all eternity, to stop these things. Because basically they're saying, like, if you don't stop these things now and they got out, because there's like thousands more, if not, like, there's just a crap ton more sealed away in that other world. And like, if they came out here, they would devour the entire light of the planet, as well as the sun, eventually the stars, and they'd keep going and going until there was no light left. Which is kind of like interesting that, like I said, like it's not a beast you can necessarily kill at the very least, unless it's in a super weakened state, I assume. But it's like, it's an endlessly devouring creature that, I mean, granted, there's certain the things that they got in this episode, basically it poisons the light that the thing devours so that it actually hurts it rather than makes it stronger. But it's like, it's a thing that would keep going on and on and on, and nothing would possibly be able to stop it. So it's just kind of interesting, It's always interesting when you see like, quote unquote, like unstoppable beasts being introduced and stuff like that. Because it's like, how would you honestly handle that thing? How would you kill something like that? I guess arguably kind of crossing streams with class a little bit. It's like kind of almost like the Shadowkin. Makes you wonder who would actually win in a battle, considering they might have been like the ultimate like opponents for these things, considering like they're all shadow and these things feed on light. Maybe, I don't know. But nevertheless, he was willing to make that sacrifice because he didn't want anyone else to make that sacrifice. It's like, hey, this is up to me, which Bill was like, no, don't do that. And the others are like, no, you can't do it because this is our fight. Because, I mean, a big component of this episode is about bravery, courage, and just facing your fear. Because at the end of the day, on both sides, whether it's, the barbarian/villagers or the Roman soldiers, like the Roman soldiers that survived were the ones that deserted. And, which Bill Con brings up, it's okay to be scared. Like, everyone's scared. Not being scared doesn't make you brave. It just makes you stupid. it's okay to be scared, but being brave means knowing that you're afraid and still willing to do whatever you need to do it. Like, no one is without fear. It's kind of like, that's how I've always seen it, and that's how certain things have kind of implanted that thought in my head. That's at least how I see it and everything. So, because both sides were scared, like, it's like, because at the end of the day, and it's something that, Bill kind of points out to him, it's like, yo, you can understand each other now, right? Because I don't speak Latin. Do you speak Latin, or do you speak whatever language that the barbarians speak or whatever? It's like, no. But like, what do you guys sound like to each other? It's like, they sound like kids. Now, arguably, like, well, what he was saying was like basically, oh, when you take the time and when someone finally stops talking, when you finally get to hear what the other person, when you finally take time out of your business, I'm sorry, when you finally take the time needed to just sit down and just listen to somebody, you realize that everyone sounds like kids. Now, I'm wondering, are they saying that specifically because, like, I guess it could honestly fall both ways of like, oh yeah, because you guys are legitimately kids, because the dude that was kind of the leader of the Romans, like amongst that group, I think his name is Lucius. He was like 18 years old, and I'm sure like Carr is the same age, as roughly around the same age too. So I'm sure it's that, like the sense of like, oh, you actually are kids, but also at the same time, I'm like, the fact is that you're arguing, like hearing what you sound like arguing about things, like, because it's like, oh, you're in a different language, you're just like, oh, they're saying something, blah blah blah, who cares? But it's like, once you finally realize, like, oh, like, this is what we sound like. Once we finally take time to understand each other, how childish we're being. There's a monster out there that's planning to wipe us all out, and we're up here trying to keep up this argument. It's like, yeah, there's bad blood and everything because of the fact is what the Romans did, but this is a fight that kind of takes precedence over that. And it was something that even Carr herself, she was like, because the doctor's like, I'm gonna need your help, and she's like, I'm scared. And it's like, no, like, who wouldn't be scared in that type of situation? So it was a big component of the episode of like, hey, facing your fear and overcoming your differences. And at the end of it, like, Carr was like, no, this is our destiny. She's like, this is my fight as a gatekeeper, it was her right, this is her fight. And so her and the Romans kind of joined together, and they went inside the portal like, hey, we'll keep this thing busy for as long as it takes. We'll keep pushing them back, in the way the doctor puts it, like continuously fighting the dark, always protecting the light, essentially, kind of in an almost eternal struggle. It's like literally, in a beautiful way it is. It's kind of the metaphor of kind of the balance of light and darkness, in a sense of like, there's someone there shielding back the darkness from completely overtaking the light, in a very interesting way. So, like I said, it's sad because, obviously the doctor didn't want things to end up that way, but, Bill said it herself, like, you can't fight every fight. This is their destiny. This is their fight. Just like you have all these other fights, which the doctor was kind of like, I've always been there since like since humanity first began on this planet. I've been all over the place, all over time. Like this, I've been here protecting this planet, and I will continue to do so in this way too. But, it also, like, when you break it down and think about it too much, it's almost like a situation of like, aren't you being selfish, Bill, not wanting him to do that? But at the same time, it's like, it isn't his fight. This is their fight. This is their destiny. It's like that he can't, like, it's one of those situations where it's like, you feel a little conflicted in my mind. Like, you wouldn't want the doctor to do this because it's like, because that would mean he'd have to be doing this for the rest of his life. But at the same time, it also means like, I'm doing a lot of stuff because of the way time travel and stuff works, because it's like, if you're here doing this, that means you were never there to do other things, which at the same time, it's like, well, if that's the case, wouldn't technically everything up to this point, I guess it's a loop of like, oh, things would disappear, but at the same time, it's like, well, because at some point you have to come back here to fight this thing for all eternity. So it's time travel. It's all in your head. It's its own thing. I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting all over the place with it, but like, the point I was making is like, it seems it's a little sad when you think about it, like, but it is their fight, and he has his own fight. And I think that's something that the doctor was trying to get across in this episode too, because he knows what that's like, being mad about a war, like people having their own way and everything like that. He's come across many opponents. I'm sure he feels that the strongest about the Daleks, like, and he's always felt that way about them. He's kind of like, what was that season? Was that 8 or 9? When he actually met, like, the leader of the Daleks and everything. And that was this whole situation of, like, that meant him confronting his ultimate enemy and stuff like that. Plus, he knows, obviously, from the war side of things, when it came down to it, like, the Great Time War and everything. So it's like, the doctor saw both sides of this situation. I think that's even like I think a lot of times like obviously the doctor's past influences why he does the things he does. Obviously wanting to help people and everything and do the right thing, but I think it's also because he's like I know from perspective. Been around a long time. I've seen and done and experienced a lot of things, so in particular like the Time War and everything, and he's seen what it's like when like you're fueled by nothing more than revenge and what it means at the end of the day. Like there will be so many casualties that things will be so much worse because you let your hatred get the best of you, you know. So that was, I don't know, just overall that was just a cool part of the episode. Just the whole story and everything. Playing like that, and also appreciate the fact this is like let everyone always remember Kara's name. The fact no matters of what she did, and have the crows remember it. And the fact is the crows will like all of their calling and stuff like that is them saying like Kara's name. Also like going back to the beginning of the episode where you start like present day, it's like this little brother boy is telling I would assume his sister like, hey, don't be around here. If you listen to the ghosts, they'll eat you. I guess it's kind of like almost like slightly, you know, there's a whole like telephone game of like, oh yeah, you pass along a message, but every time it goes to the next person, a little more of the message gets distorted and less of what it was. So it's a situation of like, by the time it reaches you, it's something completely different. So maybe the story of all the ghosts, like, oh, they'll devour you and stuff like that, is a story from the Eaters of Light that they'll devour you. But the voices she heard, the little girl heard the ghost as well as the music was the little bit of time and space that exists that like, you know, because the ripple is open a little bit enough to like, you know, that it can, you know, because that's happening all at once because time is constantly moving and there's little bits of that hole still open enough for stuff to kind of slip through. So their voices is what she was hearing and everything. So that was just kind of like a beautiful thing too, in my opinion. But another part of the episode is at the very end when we find out like, oh yeah, Missy's actually on the TARDIS, and you have Nardole being like, whoa, what? It's like, oh yeah, like I was wondering about that because I was like, oh, we completely jump over that situation, and it's like, oh, I guess they sent her back or whatever. It's like, oh no, she's actually been on the TARDIS the entire time. She's kind of his assistant. She's working with him about certain things, and Nardole's like, no, you got to put her back in the vault and everything, which is like, well, she can't technically leave the TARDIS, so I mean, this is like the second best prison for her and everything. But it's like, oh, but she still has access to the TARDIS. It's like she has her limitations and stuff like that, but even like Missy's joking about it and everything. So like, you didn't tell them about me and everything. Apparently not. Kept it a secret. Even Bill's like, are you sure about this, doctor? Like, which he's like, yeah, he is. Because the fact of the matter is, like, looking at the whole situation, I was like, oh, she was watching and everything. And he's like, oh, so what did you learn from it? And she's like, oh, like, is this really how, you know, being the goody two shoes that you are, is this really how you want things to play out? And it's like, basically, it's like, it's so interesting, Missy. The fact of the matter is, you are so caught up, you understand so much about the universe, but you don't hear the music, almost basically saying like you see the big picture, you know everything there is to know, you see the big picture, but the thing is you have a tendency to not focus on the smaller details, not realizing that these little moments, they may seem insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but they matter. Every little moment, every little, what's the word I'm looking for, like spark, I guess, in the grand scheme of everything, that little spark, every spark matters. It's kind of, you have to take time out to realize that, to hear the music. That's my way of paraphrasing it. Like, I'm probably not giving it the same nuance that he kind of gave to it and the real meaning behind it, but that's how I kind of took away from it, which she at one point hears the music and starts crying, which is like, oh, why am I crying? And the doctor's like, oh, maybe you just want to impress me. She's like, yeah, maybe it's just like some grand scheme of mine, right? And it seems like the doctor is saying that basically wants to take this as an opportunity, like, hey, maybe, you know, you are constantly changing. You are changing, and the fact of the matter is, maybe this means we can be friends again. Like, obviously, there's some reservations there because, like, she's reaching for him and kind of steps back, but he holds her hands and everything. So, which I think for Missy, like I said, there's a part of me that has my doubts, but I want things to work out. Like, I want them to be friends again. I don't want them to be where they are. But it seems like he is trying to give her another chance. That's why he's letting her stay on her daughter. So maybe that means we'll be seeing her a little more going forward throughout the season as kind of, you know, help with all these misadventures and stuff like that, trying to be good, you know? It's definitely going to be interesting because I obviously, like, to me, it's very interesting considering comparisons because, like, that's what Clara kind of had to do for the Doctor back in season 8 when he became the 12th Doctor, because I was like, it's like, oh, I kind of have to tell you how to be good again, like, tell you how to be not be kind of an a-hole to people or a douchebag. You know, it's like she kind of had to help him with that. So I'm thinking it's almost like they're reflecting that a little bit between his relationship with Missy. At least that's how I'm seeing it. I mean, once again, it's a situation like doesn't remember Clara, so it's like a situation of like maybe there's some part of him that does remember that, and he's kind of passing it on. At least that's how I'm seeing it. Like I said, overall, I'm rambling on this entire time, and I do apologize. But overall, very good episode. Very interested to see what goes down for the rest of the season, especially the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Orphan Black, a very, very good episode where basically everything's kind of coming to a head in the situation of like Sarah wakes up in Daya and she's like, really not again, literally back here again after like, you know, after being away from the building, literally in the same circumstances almost as like season 2's finale, where she was like, yep, like I'm kind of here again and I have no choice in the matter. So Rachel wants her to give up because basically in her eyes it's like, yeah, everyone else has already given up, submitted. You're the only last standout. Let's put this war to an end. Like, hey, Siobhan and Kira are here. Allison's already given up, not really by choice. Casima's given up. She's working on a cure and everything. Everything's looking like A-okay and everything. So Sarah's the last stand. I was like, oh, Kira, she can go to school and everything, but obviously we'll run tests on her because she is special. Everything that might make her special, yes, that's our intellectual property, but at the end of the day, she's still your daughter, so we're not going to quote-unquote take her from you, even though she's had to spend so much of her time running and fighting back because you were going to take her daughter from her, so you really expect her to really be all okay with it. And it's something that, interestingly enough, even like Sarah ended up asking Ferdinand, is like, are you really okay with all this? You hate Neo-Lucianists. You killed the dude that was like one of your people because he was a Neo-Lucian, but he's kind of like, nah, it's personal. Because the reason why he's all okay with this situation is because Rachel's okay with it. Even throughout the episode, like that's a big part of this episode too, him and Rachel falling apart because Rachel wasn't the woman she was. She's like, you know, above beating him, because it turns out beating him, because as we know, like probably out of every one of the clones, every one of the leaders has their own issues. Rachel has the biggest issue because she always was raised to be like, oh, I'm the one leader that knew from the very beginning who she was and everything. You know, her situation with her mom and her dad and everything. And after, like, you know, obviously, like, because obviously being introduced to Sarah pissed her off, because it's like, you were the only one who was able to have a child, while the rest of us weren't. I wasn't. I was bred in this whole situation. I was bred Neo-Lucian to his, you know, and it's like, you're the one that's special in a sense. Like, I'm the one that's supposed to be special. And so she's always had such an issue, and that's what she lashed out. That's why she hit Ferdinand, and he really liked that. I mean, it kind of went hand in hand, like her anger issues plus him being a masochist. It went hand in hand, but like, she's not like that anymore because she's calmed down. I brought it up last episode. She's very different from the Rachel that we knew before. Rachel before was very vindictive, would have done whatever it took to get her way. It was the reason why she lashed out, but she's not doing that anymore because she's calm, cool, and collected, because now she feels like she has transcended. She has found her purpose. What she was like, this is what I was made for. This is where I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to do. Ferdinand's not all happy about it, so I mean, which later on leads to him kind of snapping later on and killing MK. Did not expect things to go down the way they did, especially as horrible as it went down. Like, he literally stomped her chest in, dude. That freaking sucked. I was like, dude, I was so heartbroken when I was seeing that, dude. It's like, because we haven't seen a Lita die in a very long time. The last Lita within the confines of the show, obviously, like within the story, like the last one that died was the one that Cosima had seen that was sick. Cosima like had learned like, oh yeah, like Delphine told her like, yeah, she had died, like the other Lita had died like 3 or 4 days earlier from the illness or whatever. So I think storyline wise, she was within that context, she was the most recent one to die. But before that, the last one we saw die was the German. So we haven't seen Alita die in a long time. And then see it go down so brutally like that sucks, dude. And it breaks my heart, especially because MK came back. You know, she's even said it to Sarah, like, hey, things could have been different if we had, like, you know, she wishes that things had been different, probably like they met under different circumstances, that it wasn't such a heinous situation that led to them meeting and stuff like that. I mean, because Sarah's like, no, MK, we're going to get you to Scott. They're going to take care of you. Casima's working on the cure and everything. But MK, like, She says she's been sick for a while, so that makes me wonder, like, was she even sick before we saw her re-pop up again, like, near the end of season 4? Was she actually sick before then, but she never really showed the symptoms? Or maybe she was talking about in that time that this entire time she's been sick. Or I mean, I don't know. But she's like, I've been sick for a while. And Sarah's like, why didn't you tell me? It's like, nah, we're in this together. You're not on your own anymore. And MK appreciated that, but I guess she felt like, I'm not going to slow you down, because she's like, I spent so much of my life running. It's like, I'm not running anymore. At the end of the day, yeah, you want to protect Kira and everything, but this is so much more than that, because a big part of it is like, what is Westmoreland up to? Like, what is his plans and everything? And she was trying to dig deeper into that, couldn't find anything, but Ferdinand killed her. It's just like accumulation of everything. The fact is her looking like Rachel and like taking everything out on her, because for him it's like Ferdinand's like everything he's done, the large amount of money he acquired, which MK took, which is also a reason why he was super pissed at her and everything, plus the whole Helsinki situation, like, oh, you should have died then, I'm gonna correct that mistake. Like, it was just so much built up that he just lashed out at her at. And I don't even know if that was any bit of remorse at the end when he killed her. Like, oh, he kind of looked at her like there was some remorse, and he laid her mask on her chest. I don't know if he actually felt bad or not. I mean, to him, like, legitimately, I thought he was going to die. Like, I was like, oh, shit, okay, MK's going to kill him, and then it's going to turn into a backlash. But it's like, nope, he ended up killing her. I thought he was going to take the knife, but the moment he threw it away, I almost thought MK was okay. But he did, like, I mean, that's like the most brutal way to die, dude. And it sucks that her story played out that way. I hate that it ended that way. And on top of all these things going on, like, there's the distance between Sarah and Kira. Like, Kira's like, no, Mom, we're safe now, we're good. Even going as far as referring to Rachel as Auntie Rachel. And Sarah's like, whoa, don't be calling her Auntie Rachel. And even at points asking Sarah's like, is this the right thing to do? And Sarah's like, come on, we can go. And she's actually the one that found out about MK dying. But Sarah's like, no, we need to leave, because this whole situation was being set up. The moment they left, there was no going back. All doors, all routes would be closed. But Kira's like, no. Like, it's so interesting seeing how Kira's character has changed drastically as the series progressed. She's become more and more defiant in a sense of like, just like, there's always been something a little odd about Kira, and she's just kind of like, at moments, like, just something takes over her, and she just kind of like, one prime example is like, obviously when she was in the comic book store, she was playing a game, she's like, this is stupid, and just like knocks to pieces in the entire game on the floor and everything, and it's like at points kind of just storming off. So it's like, obviously there's a part of me like, oh, she's just she's a kid, emotions, or she's in a very hard situation. But it's like, this was very different. Like, she's actually choosing Rachel over Sarah, because that was the thing I was worried about. I didn't even talk about at the very beginning. Is like, I thought everyone was on board. Obviously, S and P were like, nah, bump that. We playing alone for now, because we don't know any routes. Because S's people are kind of being put on hold, because it's like they're being watched. It's like, we're out of moves to make, and this was like their final move to make, but it didn't work out, because Kira was like, no, I want to know what's wrong with me. I want to know not necessarily what's wrong, but why am I different? Why am I the way I am? Because obviously she's always been able to see things. Because there was also that thing that Kira talked about last season. She was like, yeah, that Mommy was at the center, and all the other sisters, the other aunties came together, and I think they killed Sarah. It's just because, like, no, you didn't want to do it, but you had to, because Mommy had become a monster. Obviously, all that was kind of connected to the bug thing in her cheek, so I assume that was all connected. Whether or not that's still a prediction that can happen or not, I don't know. But it's a situation like, Sarah's feeling like she's losing Kira, like, to Rachel of all people, Miss Despicable, and like, she can't wrap her head around. It's like, why do you want to be with her? It's like, I'm your mom and everything. I love you. Everything I've done has been for you, as well as the rest of my sisters. Like, I've always tried to do the right thing, but it almost seems like it's not good enough anymore. Which is that part of me is like, is Kira playing along with this because of the set of reason I'm trying to understand? I mean, she is more in tune with the other sisters than like Sarah is, so she feels and knows things she shouldn't know. So maybe that's what she's reacting to, or maybe it is simply because, hey, I want to know what I'm all about. I don't care, like, maybe in her mind it's like, Auntie Rachel's a means to an end. But it's like, is she really playing along? I feel like if she was playing along, she would have let Sarah in on it. So it's like she's losing her daughter. Like, it's like, it's like the ultimate like I'm screwed situation of like Sarah's like almost giving up. You see her at the end, like tears in her eyes and everything, seeing Kira walk away. It's not like she lost her baby, but it's still the situation of like I could potentially lose Kira because it's like, yeah, they're saying they won't take her, but it's like you spent so much time trying to take her. Who's to say when it's all said and done, you just won't? And like, I'm not gonna let my little girl, I'm not gonna let my baby be an experiment, be a lab rat, you know, considering the fact that she herself is one. So there's just so many heavy layers to that situation, and it befuddles me like what, because the thing is, that's a character we've never 100% known exactly what's on her mind. And it's Kira. It's like we've never really known. She's been in the background, she's known a lot more, she understands things a lot more than she really let on. So it's like I mean, that's a question I brought up like talking about last season, like what's Kira's whole deal? Like why is she the way she is? Like what makes her so special? I mean, because that's, you know, I mean, because that's also something that popped up this episode too with the whole Donnie and Helena situation. It's like, yep, it was like, oh well, we might have to do some surgery and stuff like that. C-section. They look at the babies. The baby that got punctured by the stick healed. So I was like, whoa, wait a minute, what? The scars, like the damage that was there is done. It's healed. So then it shows you Helena's babies are special, like Kira is, which makes sense because whatever makes Sarah special would also apply to Helena, them being twins and everything. I mean, because it's like, much like, you know, Sarah, she's the only other leader that can have babies too. So, and the fact of the matter is, on top of that, she is having twins too. So, what that means, what they are, it's some kind of genetic, like, miracle. Because, I mean, along the, like, line, sorry, along those lines, it's like, going back to what this whole thing is about, like what does Westmoreland want? Because at the end, like he ends up talking to Cosima. An interesting thing about like the actor who they got to play him, I don't know his name. I know I've seen him in plenty of stuff, but the first thing that comes to my mind when I see him is immediately the Reverend from Haven. So that was pretty cool. But basically, he makes this whole metaphor about people talking like, basically it was comparing like cheese, like, oh, this and that about cheese, but it's like, oh, you're so focused on the cheese, no one really asks too much about the cow. But in their particular circumstances, it's like, yeah, you guys are kind of the cheese because I made you and stuff like that. But the question is, like, maybe when you healed up your sisters and everything, when this cure you work on comes out and is able to help all your sisters, maybe you'll be able to circle back around and talk to me, the cow, you know, in this whole equation. So it's like, what he wants. Obviously, there's a whole longevity thing, which he kind of explains to a certain extent. He says, thanks to Neo-Lucian science as well as his own genetics, he has been around as long as he has been. There's even a picture with him and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. If you're unfamiliar, that's the dude who wrote the Sherlock Holmes books. But it's like, what does that mean necessarily, genetics? Is that, I mean, could his genetics in some shape or form be connected to the leaders? I mean, obviously that all goes back to Siobhan's mom, Kendall, but it's like, could there be more of a connection there that we don't know about? I mean, because, I mean, Kendall was kind of a scientific, like, one in a million shot type of thing that happened, you know, her having both the Lita and the Castor DNA. And speaking of Castor, I love the line of like, yo, Iron, you can go to the island, play nice with Rachel, kind of get close and everything, because you want to help out with Susan, right? So it's like, okay, you can go to the island and everything because she stabbed Rachel. He's like, oh, what can I do? And the other dude that's with Scott is like walking him away. He's like, don't worry, dude, your mom's going to be okay. And it's like, oh, he doesn't know. He doesn't know. If you've forgotten, which I don't know if you have, but Ira and and Susan are more than, in a weird way, it is kind of that weird thing when you actually think about it too much, because it's like, you know, where the casters and the leaders kind of come from and everything. It's kind of like, you kind of raise him and everything, but he's kind of your lover too, and it's weird, and it's just so sad. It's just because she's older doesn't mean she's like my mom, even though it's like the whole situation of like, oh, she kind of raised you like a mom, but at the same time, your lover. It's complicated and weird when you actually think of that, break it down like that, and I feel so bad for Ira, because you almost see a look on his face like, I mean, also, what does that mean for the casters? Because this whole situation was about, like, yeah, let's cure the leaders, but who cares about the casters? That was the whole situation last season. So, I mean, like I said, the only, like, casters we're aware of are Ira and Mark. like I said, I think I brought it up last episode. I assume Mark's off somewhere with Gracie, enjoying whatever time he has left before he, glitches or whatever. So they might be the only ones left because the rest of them probably got wiped out with that whole situation. I mean, truth be told, we never actually found out what happened to their mom, like Cody. The last time we saw her was when, was it Ferdinand showed up last season and got in a car with her? That was the last time we saw her. So we also haven't seen like the heads of gosh, what was her name again? Because she was someone MK was looking into, because she's one of the top people at what's that top? It's not Top Spin, is it? It's something I forgot. The group that basically exists above like Dyad. Dyad's kind of like lower down the totem pole to them, and it's like where do they stand in comparison to this whole like Westmoreland situation, But Helena is on the run. She got away. I felt bad for that doctor because it's hard to say, because it came up, between S and Delphine, who had their whole talk later on. But it's like in this time, you don't know who to trust, like who's part of Neolution. That was kind of a big thing last season. Like you don't know who's part of this or not. But at the same time, it's like I mean, like I said, it feels like they're on the losing side, and I'm sure that's what Sarah feels. But like, the fact is that Helena stabbed that doctor through the mouth with that needle. I felt so bad for her. And I love that Donnie showed up and saw like the aftermath and that and everything. He's like, oh, no one's paying attention. Okay, like I'm gonna get out of here. She also told Donnie, is like, okay, I'm gonna tell you where I'm going. Only tell Sarah where I'm going. And then like whispers in. Donnie's like, wait, really? There? So I was thinking that was going to be him at the end of the episode popping up, which brings up the question, has Donnie and Mrs. S ever been in the same scene together? I don't think they have they? Like, I'm sitting here thinking, like, how many characters have actually ever crossed paths? I don't actually remember. Has Art actually ever physically met any of the clones? I don't remember. I mean, obviously he's with Allison this time, but it's like, I mean, like, has he ever had any interactions with Donnie and stuff like that? I don't think so. Like, obviously, the one he interacts the most with is Sarah, but obviously he's interacting with Allison, because obviously in this particular situation, he's kind of locked in the middle of it. He's got his partner, Maddie, and Maddie's like, oh, tell us if you get in contact with Donnie. It's like, what? I mean, they want to know where Donnie is because they know Donnie's with Helena. They assume that he's with Helena, so it's like, we need to know where Donnie is so we know where Helena is, because we need to shut this down. Like, Sarah's the last piece in all of this, but let's not forget, Helena's the wild card. She's always been the wild card, and she will continue to be the wild card. Once again, let's not forget, she was kicking ass last season. Not just last season, but last episode, choking dude out, even though she's like super preggers and everything, so. But then, like I said, getting back to it, Delphine and Mrs. S are talking and everything, and it's like, okay, I can't let them know that I'm here and talking to you and everything. So what I want you to do is like not tell Sarah that we're talking. So it's like, okay, what's this about? Obviously, Delphine knows a lot more than she's letting on, so I have no idea how this is all going to play out. Like, I feel like things have been bad in the past, but not to the extent where it almost feels like legitimately all hope is lost. It's like we're stuck in this situation until it's all said and because obviously, like, she made it very clear last season that Rachel made it clear that she was going to restart this whole situation. That's what she was basically telling the people at the top. Maybe she was talking to the Neolution people and everything that Evie kind of was talking to and everything, which we haven't seen them this season, which they're kind of like secondary. They're kind of like topside. That's it. Literally, because I was thinking like, oh yeah, because it clicked in my head simply because I was like, oh yeah, Westmoreland kind of works in the background, but they work topside. That's what immediately went in my head. Didn't remember groups. Like there's a lady that actually Charlotte was with before. Like the last time we saw her was like season 2's finale. Like I forgot her name. She was the lady that was kind of giving Rachel the go ahead to kill Leaky and everything. So. But the point is, like, where do they all fall in part in this? I guess, like this, like I said, they handle things on Westmoreland keeps to the island, works things behind the scene. They kind of handle things basically stateside and stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm very curious to see like where this all goes, like how this plays out. Are the bots still part of the equation of implanting him in all the clones and stuff like that? Because she is going to continue the cloning process and stuff like that. Because it seems like it's all part of Westmoreland's whole shtick, and Rachel's like happy to be a part of it and everything. And you almost see her almost gloating at him when she's taking Kira away. It's just like, yep, you tried so hard to protect your daughter, but now almost like she's mine now. Haha. She's with Aunt Rachel, which is like, I hope this isn't in a situation where Rachel dies or something like that. I hope that she kind of gets welcomed into the sisterhood. That when, like I said, I have my thoughts. I brought it up last episode of like where I feel like the series might go, like how this might all play out and everything. But even then, it's like that was just a thought. Who knows? We won't know until it comes down to the wire of like how this will all play out. Art still, I brought it up earlier, but Art's still stuck in his particular situation, got Maddie for a partner. Gonna keep close eyes on him. And it's like, because, not only his life, but his daughter's life is in danger and everything. His entire life is gonna be turned upside down if he tries to help him. So it's like, there are no options in this situation. It's like I said, it seems like they're on the losing side more so than they've ever been before. And I'm so excited to see where it goes. Like, super excited to see where, like, the next episode takes us. Like, what is it that Delphine is wanting to talk to S about? Maybe she knows more about what Westmoreland's up to. Like I said, this has all got to do with the longevity and stuff like that. But even then, it seems like it's beyond that. It's always been about perfecting the human being, but is it just that? Maybe in the long run, he's like, oh, this is all about humanity and stuff like that. Or maybe it's more so about himself. Maybe even after all this time, he's actually dying and he doesn't want to die. Maybe that is it. Like, his longevity has gone as far as it can, and he needs something else. He needs the leaders around to keep, there's some kind of legacy thing, sure, but I'm sure he wants to be alive long enough to see his legacy, exceed expectations and stuff. Like, I don't know. Just speculation. We really will just have to wait and see, like, where the next episode takes us. Also, let's not throw any last note too. What about Ferdinand kind of being ousted by, Rachel, like kicking him out and everything? So he's kind of left out in the cold. What does this mean for him going forward? Last thing I want to say, I promise. Sorry. But that's it. Last thing I want to talk about in this episode. So, but till the next time we meet, God, I'm stumbling. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.